The dust cloud rose from the valley floor like a prayer ascending toward heaven, and Austin Harper watched it from his saddle with the kind of attention a man learns when he has nothing but land and loneliness to occupy his days. Spring of 1877 had come to eastern Montana territory with its usual reluctance, bringing mud and wind and the promise of another season spent talking mostly to cattle. He was 32 years old and had been alone on his ranch for the better part of 7 years, ever since his father died and his brother headed east to chase some woman who probably wasn't worth the trouble. Austin didn't begrudge him the choice. Some men were built for solitude and some weren't, and Austin had made his peace with which kind he was, or so he told himself during the long winter nights when the wind howled through the gaps in the cabin walls. The dust cloud was moving in an odd pattern, not like cattle or horses running free, and curiosity pulled him down from the ridge where he had been surveying his northern fence line. His ranch, the Triple H, covered nearly 3,000 acres of grassland and creek bottom, good grazing country that his father had claimed back in the early 60s when Montana was still wild even by frontier standards. Austin had built it up, added another 1,000 head of cattle, fixed the irrigation ditches, and maintained the buildings until everything ran with the precision of a good watch. But a ranch was meant to be a family enterprise, and with just him and 2 hired hands who came and went with the seasons, it felt more like an obligation than a home. He urged his bay gelding down the slope, following a game trail that wound between sagebrush and scattered pines. The closer he got to the source of the dust, the more certain he became that something unusual was happening. The wind carried sounds that didn't belong, bleating that was too high-pitched for sheep, a kind of chittering noise he couldn't place, and underneath it all, a woman's voice speaking in soothing tones that made something in his chest contract, with an emotion he had nearly forgotten existed. Austin crested a small rise and pulled his horse to a stop, staring at the scene before him with the kind of disbelief a man feels when reality contradicts everything he thought he knew about his own territory. In a depression that formed a natural bowl, protected on 3 sides by rock outcroppings and on the 4th by a thick stand of cottonwoods, someone had created a makeshift animal sanctuary. Rough pens made from salvaged lumber and woven branches contained at least a dozen creatures. 3 mule deer fawns spotted with youth, a pair of pronghorn antelope that should have been running free on the plains, several rabbits in various states of injury, a young coyote with a splinted leg, and what appeared to be a golden eagle with a damaged wing perched on a dead tree that had been dragged into position for that purpose. In the center of this organized chaos stood a woman in a faded blue dress that had been patched so many times, it was hard to tell what the original fabric had looked like. Her hair was the color of honey in sunlight, pulled back in a practical braid that hung to her waist, and her face, though smudged with dirt, possessed a determined beauty that hit Austin like a physical blow. She was kneeling beside one of the fawns, wrapping what looked like a torn petticoat around its foreleg while speaking to it in that same gentle voice he had heard from the ridge. Austin cleared his throat, and the woman's head snapped up. Her eyes were green, the color of new grass after rain, and they regarded him with a mixture of wariness and defiance that suggested she had been expecting trouble and was prepared to face it head-on. "This is private land," Austin said, then immediately felt like a fool because obviously she knew that, and hospitality was supposed to come before property rights, at least according to his mother's teachings, which still echoed in his head despite her being 10 years in the grave. The woman stood slowly, placing herself between Austin and the fawn, and he realized she was younger than he had first thought, probably no more than 24 or 25. "I know," she said, her voice carrying an Eastern accent, maybe Pennsylvania or Ohio. "I'm sorry for trespassing. I needed somewhere safe to keep them, and this place was empty." Austin dismounted, moving carefully so as not to spook the animals or the woman. "How long have you been here?" She hesitated, then seemed to decide that honesty was her best option. 3 weeks. I've been walking out here every morning from town before dawn and leaving after dark. I didn't think anyone would notice." "Town being what exactly?" "Billings is 40 miles south. There's a settlement another 15 miles east," she said. "About 30 people. I've been working at the general store, but the owner said if I kept bringing animals into the back room, he would dismiss me, so I had to find somewhere else." Austin looked around at the pens, the carefully tended creatures, the evidence of backbreaking work done by someone who clearly had no resources beyond determination and compassion. "You built all this?" A flush of pride crossed her face, momentarily pushing aside the defensiveness. "I used fallen timber from the creek bed and some boards I found in what looked like an abandoned homestead about a mile from here. I didn't steal anything that belonged to anyone. The homestead was the Peterson place. They gave up 2 winters ago after their children died of fever. You're welcome to whatever you can salvage from it." Austin moved closer to one of the pens, studying a pronghorn with a festering wound on its flank. "This one needs more than bandages. The infection is spreading." The woman's face fell. "I know. I've been cleaning it with whiskey and wrapping it fresh every day. But I don't have money for a veterinarian, and the doctor in the settlement said he doesn't treat animals." Austin looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion in the set of her shoulders, the determination in her jaw, the kindness in her eyes that extended to creatures most people would have left to die or shot to put out of their misery. Something shifted in his chest, like a door he had nailed shut was being pried open against his will. "I can treat it," he heard himself say. "I do my own veterinary work for the cattle. It's not pretty, but it's effective." The wariness in her eyes intensified. "Why would you help me? This is your land. You should be running me off." Austin pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair, buying time to figure out why he was doing this. What impulse was driving him to extend himself toward a stranger who was technically trespassing? "What's your name, Lily?" "Lily Barrett. Austin Harper. I own this ranch and about 3,000 acres around it, and I'm helping because my mother would rise from her grave and haunt me if I turned away someone doing the kind of work you're doing here." He whistled to his horse, which ambled over with the long, suffering patience of an animal, used to its owner's whims. From his saddlebags, he pulled a small kit he always carried: clean rags, a bottle of carbolic acid, needles and thread, and a flask of whiskey for both disinfection and courage, depending on what the situation required. Lily watched him approach the pronghorn with a mixture of hope and suspicion, clearly torn between accepting help and maintaining her independence. Austin had seen that look before on newly broken horses, that moment where they decide whether to trust or fight. He moved slowly, speaking in the same soothing tone Lily had been using with the fawn, and after a few minutes, he had the pronghorn calm enough to examine the wound properly. "This needs to be drained and cauterized," he said. "It won't be pleasant for her, but she'll die within a week if we don't do it." Lily knelt beside him without hesitation. "What do you need me to do?" For the next hour, they worked together with the kind of unspoken coordination that usually took people years to develop. Lily held the pronghorn steady while Austin drained the infection, cleaned the wound with carbolic acid, and used a heated knife blade to cauterize the deepest part. The animal struggled and cried out, and Austin saw tears streaming down Lily's face, but she never loosened her grip or looked away. When it was done and the pronghorn was resting in clean straw with the wound properly bandaged, Lily slumped back against the pen wall, visibly trembling. "First time?" Austin asked gently. She shook her head. "No, it just never gets easier, causing them pain to help them." Austin sat beside her, closer than propriety probably dictated, but too tired from the intensity of the work to care about convention. "Why do you do this? Most people wouldn't bother." Lily was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the other animals in their various pens. The afternoon sun slanted through the cottonwoods, painting everything in shades of gold, and somewhere a meadowlark sang its complicated song. "When I was 16, my family was traveling west from Ohio," she said finally. "We were heading to Oregon, part of a wagon train. About a week out of Fort Laramie, we were attacked by raiders. Not Indians, just white men who saw an opportunity to rob people who couldn't defend themselves. My parents and my brother were killed. I was shot in the shoulder and left for dead." Austin felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry." She continued as if he hadn't spoken, her voice distant. "I was lying there in the dirt, bleeding and alone, when a coyote came. I thought it would attack me, but it just sat nearby, watching. Then more came. A whole pack. They stayed around me all night, and in the morning, when other wagons from the train came back looking for survivors, the coyotes left. The wagon master said they had probably been protecting me from scavengers, that sometimes wild animals do things we can't explain." "And you've been returning the favor ever since?" Lily nodded. "I can't save people. I couldn't save my family, but I can save these creatures, the ones that everybody else has given up on. It probably doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense." Austin surprised himself with the conviction in his voice. "More sense than most things people do." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Austin became aware of several things simultaneously. That the sun was getting lower, that he hadn't felt this connected to another human being in years, and that Lily's shoulder was nearly touching his, creating a warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. "You can't keep walking 30 miles a day to tend these animals," he said. "It's not sustainable, and you'll work yourself to death within a month." Lily's jaw set in that stubborn line he was already beginning to recognize. "I don't have a choice. It's this, or let them die." Austin took a breath, about to make a decision that would change everything, knowing it was reckless and probably foolish, but unable to stop himself. "This land here, this bowl with the rocks and the trees, it's about 40 acres. It's not good for much except what you're already using it for. The grass is too sparse for cattle, and it's too far from the main ranch buildings to be useful for anything practical." Lily turned to look at him, her green eyes wide with confusion and something that might have been hope. "I'll did it to you," Austin continued, the words coming faster now as the idea took shape. "Free and clear. You can build a proper shelter, expand the pens, do whatever you need to do. In exchange, you help me out at the ranch sometimes. We're constantly dealing with injured animals, horses that need gentle handling, that sort of thing. And maybe you cook a meal now and then, because I'm tired of my own burnt attempts at food." "You can't just give me land," Lily protested, but her eyes were shining with tears. "You don't even know me." Austin stood and offered her his hand. "I know enough. Do we have an agreement?" Lily stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, and Austin could practically see her mind working through the implications, looking for the trap or the hidden cost. He kept his hand steady and his expression open, willing her to see that this was genuine, that for reasons he couldn't fully articulate even to himself, helping her felt like the rightest thing he had done in years. Finally, she placed her hand in his, and the touch sent something electric through Austin's entire body. Her hand was rough with work, warm and surprisingly strong as she let him pull her to her feet. Agreement, she said and smiled, and Austin felt his carefully constructed walls of solitude begin to crumble. Over the next few weeks, Austin found himself spending more time in the bowl than on the rest of his ranch. He told himself it was practical, that he was just making sure Lily got properly set up, but his hired hands gave him knowing looks that he pretended not to see. He brought lumber from his own stores, good milled boards that would make proper pens and a decent shelter. He brought tools and nails and a camp stove. He brought food from his pantry because Lily was clearly spending what little money she earned on feed and medicine for the animals rather than on herself. Lily accepted his help with a mixture of gratitude and fierce independence, insisting on doing most of the heavy work herself and refusing anything that felt like charity rather than fair exchange. She made good on her promise to help at the ranch, proving to have an almost supernatural ability with difficult horses. A stallion that had been fighting Austin for weeks gentled under her hands in a matter of days. She cooked meals that made Austin remember what real food tasted like, and she filled his quiet house with a presence that made the emptiness he had grown accustomed to suddenly feel unbearable in her absence. They talked while they worked, sharing stories in the easy way of people who have decided to trust each other. Austin told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's sternness and his mother's warmth, about his brother who had left and rarely wrote. Lily talked about her childhood in Ohio, about the dreams her family had for Oregon, about the years after their death when she had drifted from town to town, taking whatever work she could find and rescuing animals wherever she went. "I was engaged once," she admitted one evening as they sat outside the shelter Austin had helped her build, a sturdy cabin with a good roof and a stone fireplace. "About 3 years ago in Wyoming. He seemed kind, said he didn't mind my work with animals. But after we were engaged, he made it clear he expected me to give it all up, to be a proper wife who stayed home and didn't embarrass him with strange hobbies." "So you left him," Austin said. "It wasn't a question." Lily nodded. "The night before the wedding. I left a note and took a horse and rode out. I felt guilty about the horse until I mailed him money to pay for it 6 months later, but I've never felt guilty about leaving. Does that make me terrible?" Austin looked at her in the fading light, at the way the sunset painted her face in shades of rose and gold, at the sadness and strength that lived together in her eyes. "It makes you honest. Too many people stay in situations that kill their spirit slowly. You had the courage to choose yourself." "What about you?" Lily asked. "Was there ever anyone?" Austin was quiet for a long moment, watching a pair of hawks circle in the distance. "There was a woman, Sarah Mitchell, daughter of a rancher from the next valley over. Everyone assumed we would marry, combine the ranches, do what made practical sense. I thought I loved her, or I thought I should love her, which amounts to the same thing when you're young and stupid. Then I overheard her talking to her mother one day, saying how she could tolerate being married to me because I was wealthy enough, and she would just spend most of her time in Billings away from the boring ranch." "That must have hurt," Lily said softly. "It did. But more than that, it made me realize I had been settling, accepting what seemed available rather than waiting for something real. So I ended it, and she married a banker from Helena within 6 months. Last I heard, they were miserable together, which probably makes me petty for finding satisfaction in that." Lily laughed, a sound like water over stones, and Austin realized he had been trying to make her laugh for days just to hear that sound again. "I don't think you're petty," she said. "I think you're careful with your heart, which is different." Their eyes met in the gathering darkness, and Austin felt the pull between them like a physical force. He wanted to kiss her, had wanted to kiss her for weeks now, but he held back, uncertain if she felt the same way. unwilling to risk the friendship they had built. As if reading his thoughts, Lily stood and brushed off her skirt. "I should check on the eagle before it gets full dark. Her wing is healing well, and I think she might be ready to fly free in another week." Austin stood too, fighting disappointment. "I'll ride back to the ranch then. Will you come by tomorrow? That mare with the split hoof needs her bandage changed, and you're better at keeping her calm than I am." "Of course," Lily said, and then, so quickly he almost missed it, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Thank you, Austin, for everything." She was gone into the shelter before he could respond, leaving him standing in the darkness with his heart pounding and his cheek burning where her lips had touched. He rode back to his ranch in a daze, barely noticing the familiar trail, his mind full of green eyes and honey-colored hair, and the realization that he was falling in love with a woman who saved wounded creatures because she couldn't save her family. The thought should have terrified him. Austin was a practical man, a careful man, someone who planned everything and avoided risks whenever possible. But love, he was discovering, wasn't something you could plan or avoid. It simply arrived, like a spring storm over the mountains, and you either took shelter or you stood in the rain and let it transform you. He chose the rain. The next morning, Austin woke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He did his morning chores in record time, barking at his hired hands to handle the northern pasture check without him, and was saddling his horse when Lily came walking up the long drive to his ranch house. She had clearly left before dawn, and her face was flushed from the walk, her braids slightly askew in a way that made Austin want to reach out and tuck the loose strands behind her ear. "You didn't have to walk," he said, leading his horse over to her. "I was about to ride out to you." Lily smiled. "I like the walk. Gives me time to think. Besides, I wanted to get here early. I thought maybe I could make you breakfast before we work on the mare." Something in Austin's chest expanded at the casual domesticity of the offer, at the implication that she wanted to spend extra time with him, that caring for him was becoming as natural to her as caring for her animals. "I'd like that." They walked to the house together, Austin's horse trailing behind them on loose reins. The ranch house was bigger than Lily's cabin, a solid two-story structure with a wide porch and windows that caught the morning sun. Austin's father had built it to last generations, with the expectation that it would be filled with children and grandchildren, and Austin felt the familiar pang of failure as he opened the door and showed Lily into the empty rooms. But Lily didn't seem to notice the emptiness. She moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, finding supplies and starting a fire in the stove, humming softly to herself as she worked. Austin sat at the table and watched her, memorizing the way she moved, the small smile that played at the corners of her mouth, the way the morning light through the window turned her hair to gold. "You're staring," Lily said without turning around. Austin felt heat rise in his face. "Sorry. I'm just not used to having someone else in the house. It's nice." Lily glanced over her shoulder at him, and something in her expression made his breath catch. "It is nice, isn't it? I keep thinking how much easier everything is when you're not alone, how much more bearable the hard work becomes when there's someone to share it with." "Lily," Austin said, then stopped, unsure how to continue. What words could possibly capture what he was feeling? She turned fully to face him, spatula still in hand, her green eyes serious. "I need to tell you something, and I need to say it now before I lose my courage." Austin stood, his heart hammering. "All right. I know we haven't known each other long, and I know you gave me that land out of kindness, and I don't want you to feel obligated in any way, but I have to be honest." She took a breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Austin Harper. Maybe I've been falling since the moment you helped that pronghorn, instead of running me off your property. And if you don't feel the same way, I'll understand and we can keep being friends. But I can't keep pretending that working beside you doesn't make me happier than I've been since before my family died. Or that I don't look for excuses to see you every day. Or that my cabin doesn't feel emptier every time you ride away. Austin crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and took the spatula from her hand, setting it aside. He cupped her face in his hands, rough rancher's hands that had seen too much work and not enough gentleness, and looked into her eyes. "I love you," he said, and the words were both a relief and a revelation. "I think I've loved you since you stood in front of that fawn ready to fight me even though you were exhausted and alone, and I could have made your life difficult. You're the bravest, kindest, most beautiful person I've ever met. And yes, my house feels empty when you're not in it. And yes, I look for excuses to see you, and I'm tired of being careful with my heart when my heart already belongs to you." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. And then she was kissing him, or he was kissing her. And it didn't matter who started it because they were finally together. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, 2 people learning the shape of each other. And then it deepened into something more urgent, more certain. Austin wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close, feeling her warmth against him, her heart beating against his chest, and thought that this was what people wrote songs about, what made men cross continents and fight wars and risk everything. This connection, this rightness, this feeling of coming home to a person rather than a place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lily laughed. "The eggs are probably burning." "I don't care about the eggs," Austin said, but he let her turn back to the stove, keeping his arms around her waist as she rescued breakfast from ruin. They ate together at the kitchen table, their knees touching, stealing kisses between bites, talking about nothing and everything with the giddy happiness of people who have finally acknowledged what they both knew all along. After breakfast, they worked on the mare's hoof together, and Austin marveled at how much better every task was with Lily beside him. His ranch hands noticed the change immediately, grinning at each other when they thought Austin wasn't looking, and at lunch, old Tom, who had worked for Austin's father before him, pulled Austin aside. "About time you found someone," Tom said bluntly. "This place needs a woman's touch, and you need someone to keep you from turning into a bitter old hermit." Austin couldn't even be annoyed at the observation because it was true, and because his happiness was too large to be diminished by anything as small as unwanted advice. Over the following weeks, Austin and Lily fell into a rhythm that felt like the most natural thing in the world. She spent her days between her sanctuary and his ranch, and he spent his days finding excuses to be wherever she was. They worked side by side, healing animals and mending fences and building a life together, one small decision at a time. In the evenings, they sat on the porch of his ranch house or by the fire in her cabin, talking until the stars came out, learning each other's histories and dreams and fears. Austin learned that Lily was afraid of thunderstorms because they reminded her of the day her family died, when the sky had been dark and threatening. He learned that she sang to the animals when she thought no one could hear, old folk songs her mother had taught her. He learned that she was stronger than anyone he had ever met, but that she cried easily at beauty, at sunset over the mountains, or the first flight of a healed bird. Lily learned that Austin was more educated than most ranchers, that his mother had insisted he learn to read poetry and philosophy alongside practical skills. She learned that he was afraid of becoming his father, stern and distant, unable to show affection even when he felt it. She learned that underneath his quiet competence was a man who felt things deeply, who had simply lacked anyone worth feeling deeply about. A month after their first kiss, Austin rode to Billings and returned with a ring, a simple gold band with a small emerald that reminded him of Lily's eyes. He had planned to propose formally, to make a speech about love and forever, and all the things he had once thought were sentimental nonsense, but now understood were the only things that truly mattered. Instead, he found Lily in her sanctuary, covered in mud and beaming with joy because the eagle had finally flown free, soaring up from her arm into the vast Montana sky with powerful wing beats that seemed to proclaim the possibility of healing, of second chances, of survival against the odds. "Marry me," Austin said without preamble or poetry, just raw hope and love. Lily turned to him, tears streaming down her muddy face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she tackled him with a hug that sent them both tumbling to the ground, laughing like children. They lay in the grass together, looking up at the sky where the eagle was circling higher and higher, and Austin thought that happiness was a wild thing too, something you couldn't cage or control, something that simply had to be set free and trusted to return. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Billings, with Tom and a few other ranch hands as witnesses, and half the town curious to see the woman who had finally caught Austin Harper. Lily wore a new dress of green cotton that Austin had bought from the finest shop in town, and she carried wildflowers instead of hothouse roses. Austin wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling, even when the preacher gave a stern sermon about the duties of marriage that made several people in the congregation shift uncomfortably. After the ceremony, they rode back to the ranch together, Lily sitting in front of Austin on his horse, both of them eager to begin their married life away from the prying eyes of town. Austin had spent the previous week preparing the ranch house, filling it with small touches he hoped would make Lily feel at home. Wildflowers in jars on every surface, new curtains for the windows, a rocking chair on the porch positioned to catch the sunset. But when they arrived, Lily surprised him by asking to spend their wedding night in her cabin at the sanctuary, surrounded by the animals that had brought them together. Austin agreed immediately, understanding that for Lily, that place represented everything she was and everything she had built against impossible odds. They needed to begin their marriage there, in that space of healing and hope, before they could fully inhabit his house and make it theirs. They made love for the first time that night with a tenderness and passion that left them both trembling, discovering each other in the flickering firelight while outside the night sounds of the prairie sang an ancient song. Lily was shy at first, then bold, then shy again, and Austin was patient and overwhelmed and grateful in turns. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, talking in whispers until exhaustion finally claimed them. Austin woke before dawn to find Lily already up, standing at the window in her nightgown, looking out at her sanctuary. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on top of her head. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I'm happy," she said simply. "And that I keep waiting for something to go wrong, because I'm not used to being this happy." Austin turned her to face him. "Nothing is going to go wrong. We're going to have a long, boring, blissfully happy life together. I'm going to raise cattle, and you're going to save every wounded creature in Montana territory, and we're going to grow old side by side. That's a promise." Lily smiled, but there was worry in her eyes. "You can't promise that. Life doesn't work that way." "Then I promise I'll love you through whatever life brings," Austin amended. "I promise I'll be beside you in good times and bad, in sickness and health, just like the preacher said. I promise that you'll never be alone again, not the way you were alone after your family died." You have me now, and I'm not going anywhere." Lily kissed him then, deep and long, and when she pulled back, the worry had faded from her eyes. "I promise the same. No matter what happens, we face it together." They kept that promise through the changing seasons that followed. Summer came hot and dry, testing the ranch's resources and patience. They worked together to move the cattle to better grazing, to maintain the creek that watered both the ranch and the sanctuary, to survive the relentless heat that baked the land into hardpan. Lily's sanctuary grew, more animals arriving through mysterious channels. Injured creatures left at the boundary of the property by people who had heard of the woman who healed the broken, or found by Austin and his hands during their work around the ranch. Autumn brought roundup, the busiest time of year, and Lily proved herself equal to the demanding work. She rode alongside the hired hands, roping and branding with a skill that surprised everyone but Austin, who had long since learned that his wife could do anything she set her mind to. In the evenings, bone-tired and satisfied, they would sit together and plan improvements for both the ranch and the sanctuary, dreaming out loud about the future they were building. Winter arrived early and harsh, with blizzards that buried the land under feet of snow. They moved Lily's most vulnerable animals into the barn at the main ranch, creating a menagerie that was part farm, part wilderness refuge, part home. Austin loved coming in from the brutal cold to find Lily hand-feeding an orphaned fawn or rebandaging a coyote's leg, her presence turning the barn into something magical despite the howling wind outside. It was during that long winter, snowed in for days at a time, that they truly learned to live together in the small, unglamorous ways that make or break a marriage. They learned each other's moods and habits, when to push and when to give space, how to fight fair and make up thoroughly. They learned that they were both stubborn and both willing to compromise, that they made each other laugh even in the darkest moments, that the partnership they had built was strong enough to weather any storm. Spring returned with a rush of meltwater and new life. Lily's animals returned to the sanctuary as they healed, and new ones arrived to take their place. The ranch prospered under Austin and Lily's combined management, their different skills complementing each other perfectly. Austin handled the business and the heavy labor. Lily managed the horses and solved problems with a creativity that left Austin shaking his head in admiration. It was in late spring, as the prairie turned green and the wildflowers bloomed in carpets of color, that Lily told Austin she was pregnant. They were sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There's someone in there," she said, her voice full of wonder and fear in equal measure. "I'm about 3 months along, I think. I wasn't sure at first, but now I am." Austin felt his entire world shift and realign around this new reality. He was going to be a father. They were going to have a child. The ranch house, so long empty, would finally hear the sound of young laughter and running feet. The legacy his father had built would continue into another generation. But more than that, he and Lily were creating something entirely new, a family born not of obligation or tradition but of love and choice and the courage to believe in happiness despite all the evidence life had given them that happiness was fragile and temporary. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Terrified," Lily admitted. "I lost my family once, the thought of loving someone that much again, of having something I could lose." Austin pulled her close. "I know, I'm scared too, but we're going to do this together just like everything else, and this child is going to be so loved, Lily. So fiercely, protectively loved. We're going to give them everything we didn't have, everything we wished for." Lily nodded against his chest. "I know. And I'm happy underneath the fear. I'm so happy, Austin." They sat together as the stars emerged, making plans and dreaming dreams, while inside Lily, their child grew and developed, a tangible symbol of the life they had created together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer and into fall. Lily continued her work at the sanctuary, though she let Austin and the hired hands take on more of the physical labor as her belly swelled. She glowed with health and contentment, and Austin had never seen anything as beautiful as his wife heavy with their child, crooning to an injured rabbit or laughing at a goat's antics. The baby came on a cold November night, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Austin rode through the darkness to fetch the doctor from the settlement, his heart in his throat, terrified that something would go wrong, that he would lose Lily the way she had lost her family, suddenly and violently and without warning. But when he returned with the doctor, he found Lily calm and strong, managing her labor with the same determined grace she brought to everything else. The birth was long and difficult, and Austin paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal until Tom finally made him come in to support Lily. He held her hand and whispered encouragement and marveled at her strength as she worked to bring their child into the world. Just before dawn, as the first light was touching the eastern horizon, their son was born, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect. "A boy," the doctor announced unnecessarily, as Austin stood frozen in wonder, staring at this tiny human who was somehow his and Lily's, a piece of them both made flesh. "Andrew," Lily said, her voice hoarse from effort but filled with joy. "Andrew Thomas Harper, after both our fathers." Austin took his son in his arms, this impossibly small weight, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. He had thought he understood love when he married Lily, had thought he had plumbed the depths of what it meant to care for another person. But this was different, this fierce protectiveness, this overwhelming sense of responsibility and possibility. This was what his father had felt holding him for the first time, what generations of Harpers had felt, this torch being passed from one generation to the next. "Hello, Andrew," he whispered. "Welcome to the Triple H Ranch. You're going to love it here." The baby squinted up at him with unfocused eyes, and Austin's heart cracked wide open. The first year of Andrew's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Austin learned to change diapers and soothe colic, to function on minimal sleep, to see his ranch and his life through new eyes as he imagined his son growing up here, learning to ride and rope, inheriting a legacy of land and livestock and love. Lily balanced motherhood and her sanctuary work with the same determination she brought to everything, though she had to adjust her expectations and accept help more readily than came naturally to her. The ranch hands treated Andrew like a collective nephew, taking turns entertaining him while Austin and Lily worked. Tom carved wooden animals for him, teaching him their names before he was old enough to understand speech. Austin had worried that the baby would change things between him and Lily, that the consuming nature of parenthood would dim the passion and partnership they had built. But if anything, loving Andrew together deepened their connection, giving them yet another way to know and appreciate each other. He fell in love with Lily all over again watching her nurse their son, seeing the tender patience she extended to this new creature who needed her completely. On Andrew's first birthday, they threw a party at the ranch, inviting neighbors from miles around. The house was full of laughter and music, and more people than it had seen in decades, and Austin looked around at the life he had built and felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. That night, after the guests had left and Andrew was asleep in his cradle, Austin and Lily stood on the porch and looked out at the ranch, at the sanctuary visible in the distance, at the vast Montana sky full of stars. "You ever regret it?" Austin asked. Staying here instead of continuing west, seeing what else was out there. Lily looked at him like he was crazy. Regret finding you, regret building this life, are you serious? Austin pulled her close. I just want to make sure you're happy, that this is enough for you. Enough, Lily laughed. Austin, this is everything. You're everything. Our son, this ranch, those stubborn animals I keep patching up, all of it. I spent years drifting, never belonging anywhere, never letting myself care too much because it hurt too much when I lost what I loved. But you taught me that the risk is worth it, that having something to lose is better than having nothing at all. I'm not just happy, I'm home. Austin kissed her then, long and deep, tasting salt and sweetness, gratitude and desire. I love you, he said. More every day, which I didn't think was possible. I love you too, Lily replied, now and always. The years flowed by like water in the creek, each season bringing its own challenges and joys. Andrew grew from baby to toddler to boy, strong and curious and kind, with his mother's green eyes and his father's steady temperament. He learned to ride almost before he could walk properly, and he inherited Lily's gift with animals, able to calm the most skittish horse or befriend the wildest creature. When Andrew was 3, Lily discovered she was pregnant again. This time she wasn't scared, just quietly joyful, and Austin was purely excited, eager to expand their family. Their daughter, Annie Rose Harper, was born on a warm June evening, arriving quickly and easily, as if she was in a hurry to join the party. She had Lily's honey-colored hair and Austin's dark eyes, and Andrew was immediately smitten with his baby sister, appointed himself her protector from day one. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now rang with children's laughter, with arguments and games and the thousand small sounds of a family. Austin expanded the ranch, buying additional land from a neighbor who was retiring, building the Triple H into one of the most successful operations in eastern Montana territory. Lily's sanctuary became famous throughout the region, people traveling from hundreds of miles away to bring wounded animals to the woman who could heal anything. They hired help for both operations. More ranch hands, a young woman named Sarah who assisted Lily with the sanctuary, a housekeeper who helped manage the increasingly busy household. But through all the growth and change, Austin and Lily remained the heart of everything, their partnership the foundation on which the entire enterprise was built. When Andrew turned 8 and Annie was 5, they hired a teacher from back east to come live on the ranch and educate the children, along with the children of several neighboring families. The ranch became a gathering place, a center of community in the sparse settlement pattern of the Montana plains. Austin served on the territorial council, helping to draft laws and plan for eventual statehood. Lily worked with other women to establish a library and a real church building in the growing town that had sprung up 20 miles south of the ranch. They grew older together gracefully, Austin's dark hair silvering at the temples, Lily's face gaining laugh lines around her eyes. They made love with the comfortable passion of long familiarity, and still felt their hearts quicken when they caught sight of each other across a crowded room. They fought occasionally, usually about Austin working too hard or Lily taking on too many animals, but they always made up before sleeping, honoring a promise they had made early in their marriage never to let anger fester. In 1889, when Montana achieved statehood, they celebrated with a huge party that lasted 2 days. Andrew was 12, already showing signs of the man he would become, tall and serious and devoted to the ranch. Annie was 9, a wild child who loved riding fast horses and climbing trees, and driving her parents to distraction with her fearless nature. A third child, a son named Robert they called Bobby, was 3 years old, the surprise baby who had arrived when Lily was 38, and they thought their family was complete. Austin was 44 that year, his body still strong from hard work, but feeling the accumulation of injuries and time. Lily was 40, still beautiful, still vital, still saving every creature that crossed her path. They had been married for 14 years, together for 15, and Austin still felt a thrill of gratitude every morning when he woke up beside her. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Andrew teaching Bobby to throw a rope while Annie raced around them pretending to be a wild Mustang, Lily leaned her head on Austin's shoulder. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For everything. For not running me off that day when you found me with the animals, for giving me land and a home and a family, for loving me even when I'm stubborn and difficult, for building this life with me." Austin wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You have it backwards. I should be thanking you. You took a lonely, closed-off rancher and taught him how to live again, how to love, how to be part of something bigger than himself. Everything good in my life came from the day I found you in that bowl, determined to save creatures no one else cared about." Lily smiled. "Maybe we should both be grateful. For finding each other, for taking chances, for being brave enough to build something beautiful." "Agreed," Austin said and kissed the top of her head. Andrew looked up from his rope lesson and made a face. "Are you two being mushy again?" "Yes," Austin called back cheerfully. "Get used to it." Annie giggled and Bobby, not understanding the joke but wanting to be included, laughed too. The sound of their children's happiness filled the air, mixing with the evening birdsong and the lowing of cattle in the distance, creating a symphony of domestic contentment that Austin had once thought would never be his. The children grew, as children do, each finding their own path while remaining rooted in the ranch and the values Austin and Lily had instilled in them. Andrew became a skilled rancher, taking on more and more responsibility as Austin gradually handed over day-to-day operations. He was patient and thoughtful, beloved by the ranch hands for his fairness, respected throughout the territory for his integrity. At 20, he married a neighboring rancher's daughter, and Austin and Lily found themselves becoming grandparents, a development that filled them with joy and a certain wistful awareness of time's passage. Annie, true to her wild nature, became a veterinarian, one of the first women in Montana to pursue that profession. She traveled to Chicago for her education, breaking her parents' hearts with the separation, but making them fiercely proud with her determination and success. She returned to Montana at 24 and set up a practice that served both the sanctuary and the surrounding ranches, proving that her mother's gift with animals could be combined with formal medical knowledge to powerful effect. Bobby, the youngest, was different from his siblings, quieter and more introspective. He loved books and learning, and at 18 he left for university in the East, planning to become a lawyer. Austin and Lily supported his choice even as they mourned his absence, understanding that each child needed to follow their own dreams, just as they had followed theirs. Through it all, Austin and Lily remained constants for each other, their love deepening and evolving with each passing year. They faced losses together. Tom passed away when Austin was 50, and Lily grieved like she had lost a father. Several of Austin's oldest friends and neighbors died, the frontier generation that had tamed the Montana plains giving way to a new era. Austin's brother, who they had lost touch with decades ago, died back east, and the news brought a complicated grief for what might have been. But there were triumphs too. The ranch prospered beyond anything Austin had imagined, becoming one of the most successful in the state. Lily's sanctuary expanded into a formal wildlife rehabilitation center, with proper facilities and trained staff, known throughout the region. They traveled together when they could, visiting their children, seeing the wonders of the changing world, but always eager to return home to the Montana plains and the life they had built there. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Austin arranged a surprise for Lily. He led her out to the bowl where he had first found her, the place that had been deeded to her all those years ago and had grown into something far beyond either of them had imagined. The sanctuary was quiet in the evening light, most of the animals already settled for the night, and Austin walked Lily to the center to a newly placed stone marker. "What's this?" Lily asked, running her fingers over the engraved words. "Here is where healing began. Here is where love grew. Here is where two broken souls found each other and became whole." "I wanted to mark the place where my life really started," Austin said. "The day I found you, Lily, everything changed. Every good thing that's happened since traces back to this spot, to the moment I decided to help instead of run you off. I wanted there to be a marker, something permanent, so that long after we're gone, people will know this was a special place." Lily turned to him with tears streaming down her face, and they kissed in the golden light of the setting sun. Their bodies older but their love as strong as it had been 3 decades ago, as strong as it had been on their wedding day, as strong as it had been in that first moment when their hands touched in agreement. "We did good, didn't we?" Lily said, looking around at the sanctuary, at the life they had built. "We took something broken and made it beautiful." "We did better than good," Austin replied. "We did extraordinary." They grew old together, Austin and Lily, their bodies slowing but their spirits remaining vital. They became fixtures in Montana society. The rancher and his wife who had built an empire of land and livestock and love, who had raised children who contributed to their communities, who had shown that success could be measured in more than money. That legacy was about the lives you touched and the kindness you extended. When Austin was 65, he officially retired from managing the ranch, turning over full control to Andrew while maintaining an advisory role. He spent his days riding the land he loved, working in the sanctuary alongside Lily, playing with a growing brood of grandchildren who adored their grandfather and loved hearing stories about the old days when Montana was still a territory, and life was harder and simpler and different. Lily continued working with animals well into her 60s, only gradually reducing her hands-on involvement as her body protested the physical demands. She trained younger people to carry on her work, passing on not just techniques but philosophy, the bone-deep belief that every creature deserved a chance, that healing was possible, that compassion was never wasted. They celebrated their 40th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, friends and neighbors. The house overflowing with people and love and laughter. Austin looked at Lily across the crowded room, still beautiful to him, still the woman who had changed everything, and their eyes met in perfect understanding. They had done it. They had built a life together that mattered, that would last beyond their years, that would ripple forward into generations yet unborn. That night, alone in their bedroom after the party, Lily asked, "Do you have any regrets?" Austin pulled her close, fitting her body against his in the way that had become second nature over 40 years of marriage. "Not a single one." "None," Lily said firmly. "Except maybe that we didn't have more time. I wish we could do it all over again, live another 70 years together." "Then we'll have to pack everything we can into the years we have left," Austin said. "Love each other fiercely, appreciate every sunrise, take nothing for granted." "Deal," Lily agreed, and they sealed it with a kiss. They had 10 more good years together, years of watching grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren, years of quiet companionship and continued partnership. Austin's health began to fail first, his strong body finally succumbing to the wear of a lifetime of hard work. But he faced decline with the same steady courage he had brought to everything else, never complaining, grateful for each day he was granted. Lily nursed him with tender devotion, rarely leaving his side as his condition worsened. They talked for hours, reminiscing about their years together, telling each other the old stories one more time, making sure nothing important remained unsaid. On a clear autumn morning, surrounded by his family, Austin Harper died at the age of 75. His last words were, "I love you, Lily. Thank you for saying yes." Lily held his hand as he slipped away, her heart breaking but her face serene, knowing that he was ready, that they had given each other everything two people could give. She mourned him deeply, but not bitterly, understanding that 50 years together was a gift, that the love they had shared was rare and precious and worth any amount of pain at its ending. She lived 3 more years, continuing to work at the sanctuary, spending time with her family, keeping Austin's memory alive through stories and the legacy they had built together. She visited his grave every day, talking to him like he was still there, telling him about the animals she was healing, about the grandchildren's accomplishments, about how much she missed him but how grateful she was for their life together. On a spring morning, almost exactly 3 years after Austin's death, Lily went to sleep in the bed they had shared and simply didn't wake up. She was 77 years old, and according to the doctor, her heart had simply stopped, worn out from a lifetime of loving so deeply, so completely, so well. They buried her next to Austin, under the vast Montana sky they had both loved, on a hill overlooking the ranch and the sanctuary, the two places that had defined their lives. The funeral was enormous, people coming from all over the state to pay respects to the woman who had healed so many creatures, both human and animal, who had shown that compassion was strength, and that love could transform everything it touched. At the funeral, Andrew stood to speak about his parents, his voice rough with emotion. "My father was a lonely rancher who thought his life would be nothing but land and cattle and quiet solitude. Then he found my mother, tending abandoned creatures with nothing but determination and love. He gave her land and his heart, and she gave him a life beyond his wildest dreams. They built something beautiful together, something that will last long after they're gone. They taught us that healing is possible, that taking chances on love is always worth the risk, that the greatest legacy we can leave is not wealth or property, but the kindness we extend and the love we give freely." They lived that every single day, and their story, their love, will inspire this family for generations to come. The sanctuary continued to operate long after Lily's death, run first by Annie and later by her children, becoming an institution in Montana. The ranch prospered under Andrew's management, and then his sons, the Harper name remaining synonymous with integrity and success. Bobby returned from the East to practice law in Montana, serving eventually as a state senator, and carrying forward his parents' commitment to justice and compassion in different ways. The stone marker Austin had placed in the bowl became a pilgrimage site of sorts, people visiting to see where the legendary love story had begun, where a lonely rancher and a determined woman had found each other and changed not just their own lives but the lives of countless others. The words Austin had carved remained clear and true. Here is where healing began. Here is where love grew. Here is where two broken souls found each other and became whole. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Montana plains, people swore they could still feel the presence of that love, still sense the echo of two people who had loved so completely that even death couldn't entirely erase their presence from the land they had shared. Austin and Lily Harper had lived and loved and built something that mattered, and their story, their devotion, their proof that healing and hope and happiness were possible even after the deepest losses, lived on in the land and the animals and the family they had created together. Their love had been a wild thing, impossible to contain or control, and it had transformed everything it touched, leaving the world better, kinder, more beautiful than it had been before. In the end, that was the truest measure of a life well lived. Not what you accumulated, but what you gave. Not what you took, but what you left behind. And Austin and Lily Harper had left behind a legacy of love that would endure as long as the Montana wind blew. And the grass grew green, and people believed in the possibility of second chances, of healing, of finding home not in a place, but in another person's heart.